हाँ ठीक हो गया ना. Hi, welcome to this special class on Unacademy Unlock YouTube platform. Today we will be discussing about the General Studies paper 2, the last class. We've already seen most of the questions in GS paper 2. Now we'll be looking at the rest of the questions that we have to do in GS paper 2. And before starting our class, as usual, we'll look at what are the courses that are offered on Unacademy platform. Let us see what are the courses that are offered on Unacademy platform. So as you can see here on the screen, this UPSC CSE Mega Compact is there, wherein you have to answer 56 questions in 60 minutes. It is on Sunday, coming Sunday at 11 a.m. Why this Mega Compact is important? Because you can win scholarships worth 10 crores. Top 300 rankers will get up to 100% scholarship. Then there will be real-time All India ranking. Questions are curated by top educators. You can take enrollment in this course by using our code PKS10, and you can also win various prizes: Apple, iPad Mini, MacBook, iPhone, Amazon vouchers. Around 1,000 lucky participants will win Apple gadgets and Amazon vouchers also. This Mega Combat is available in both in Hindi and English, right? Then proceeding further, these are the top rankers from Unacademy. You can see second ranker, 9th, 10th, 11th, 10th, 13th, 14th, 16th, and 20th. And these are the batches starting from 27th of January on Unacademy, wherein you have Mission 2022, Lecture 2022, Expedition 2022, Mission 2023, and Lecture 2023. These are the optional courses that are starting on Unacademy platform. You can see here political science, international relations, economics, then public administration, history, sociology, geography, philosophy. These are all the courses that are starting. Then you also have this resolution to crack UPSC CSE 2023 introductory offer. You will have extra 10% off and 10% off using educator's code. If you use our code PKS10, you will get 10% off also. So you will be getting this course only for 63,898, whereas the original price is 78,999. You will get books as well as test series for this course. So these are all the courses that are offered on Unacademy platform. Let us come back and look at what we are discussing. As we know, we are looking at this paper 2 discussion. Let us see what are the questions that we have covered. We have seen up to legislative councils, right? We have seen up to legislative councils. Let us look at the rest of the questions. Rest of all of the questions. Do department-related parliamentary standing committees keep the administration on its toes and inspire reverence for parliamentary control? Evaluate the working of such committees with suitable examples. So, what are the question says? The question says that the effectiveness of this department-related parliamentary standing committees. So, as I always say, you always have to start with the why aspect of the question. Why did they commit existence? What are they? What are the functions? What are their weaknesses? And what should be the solutions? And this is a very straightforward question also, especially those who are students of public administration? It's a very, very straightforward question. So what do we say here? What do we say here is that in the year 1993, the then government had come up with this innovation called department related committees, because it was felt that there must be better and effective legislative control over executive, especially in finances and policy making also. So we had initially 17 department related committees. Later it was increased to 24. As we know, there are 54 departments and ministries, and there are 24 department related committees attached to in significant ministries of government of India. And what do they do? These department related committees, first they will look at the demand for grants of the various ministries and departments. As we know, once the budget is presented, then the parliament takes break for some period of time, during which the department related committees would discuss the proposals of the budget. They would discuss the proposals of the budget for various ministries and departments. They will also give their suggestions, basically to ensure better legislature's control over what we call finances of the government, because it is not possible for the parliament to discuss all of them on the floor of the house. It is almost impossible, and that is the reason why we have these department related committees. Then they'll give their recommendations to the government. It is for the government to whether to implement those recommendations or not. Then proceeding further, what else these department related committees do? These department related committees, apart from scrutinizing the budgetary proposals, they would also give their suggestions regarding the policies related to those ministries and departments. They would scrutinize the policies, and they would give their recommendations to the government regarding those policies. They would give recommendations to the government regarding those policies. Since these meetings are held in camera, members of parliament need not go by their political party ideologies. They can have free and frank discussions. That is what we say about these departmental related committees. Then what else the department related committees also do? Then they will also consider the annual reports of the ministries and departments, and they will look at the annual reports of the ministries and departments. They will try to see the performance of those ministries and departments by evaluating by looking at the annual reports of the ministries and departments. This is what they will be doing. Now, each committee will have 31 members, 21 from Lok Sabha and 10 from Rajya Sabha. Each committee will have 31 members. Just a minute, I'll have to. I'm getting it. Hello. Hello.
हेलो
Yeah. Hello.
सर अभी लग रहा है टाटा प्ले से
हाँ. अभी आया था.
हाँ तो सर अभी मैं आना चाहती हूँ
हाँ.
सर ब्लॉग से तब ये लगाना भूल गया था मैं जो कि आपकी मीटिंग कैसे होती है सर कोई दिक्कत आती है ना तो उस नंबर पर आपको कॉल करना होता है
हाँ.
कि ना तो कस्टमर केयर आपको जानने की जरूरत है तो फेस्टिवल लगाना भूल गया था तो फेस्टिवल लगा सकता हूँ आगे भी
हाँ.
फेस्टिवल लगा सकता हूँ सर उसको रवि करनी
आपका आवाज ठीक तरह से नहीं आ रहा है मुझे. मेरा मोबाइल पे कुछ प्रॉब्लम है. हेलो. अच्छा अच्छा, आप आ जाइए, फिर आ जाइए. ठीक ठीक. ओके. So what we are saying here is that these department related committees, they will be you have in these department related committees you have 21 members from Lok Sabha and 10 members from Rajya Sabha, and they are selected by the respective political parties depending on their strength in both Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. And then as I said, this is what they are supposed to do. But what about their performance? That is what the question says. Either have they been able to inspire the and also reverence for parliamentary control? That is what we say. Over a period of time, their performance has not been up to that mark. Why? Because the government, the control exercised by the parliament over executive depends on willingness of the executive to make itself accountable to the parliament. And what we can see here is that in recent times, executive is not willing to make itself accountable to the parliament. Executive using its majority on the floor of the house to to silence the parliament, and that can be seen in the functioning of department related committees also. As you can see here, as we can see here, recently there were so many controversies related to the functioning of this committee. Shashi Tharoor was the chairman of Committee on Science and Technology, but the BJP, the ruling party members, they simply did not like Shashi Tharoor taking up some of the controversial issues. So they wanted to Shashi Tharoor to be removed as also chairman of the committee. And what we have to remember here is that in all these committees, all the time ruling political party always has majority on the floor of the house. And they use that majority in the not only on the floor of the house, also in the committees to silence opposition. And another important thing here is that the recommendations of these committees are only what we call advisory in nature. Since they are only advisory in nature, the government never take these recommendations seriously. And especially when the demand for grants, when they submit the reports, normally most of the time, these reports are also not discussed on the floor of the house. They are not even discussed on the floor of the house. And since they are also not even discussed on the floor of the house, these committees also loses their motivation to work also, because there is no one to discuss, debate, and think about their their functioning also. So that is the reason why ultimately what we say here is that for these department related committees to become effective, we need to make certain changes. First and foremost, the government should make that sure that the recommendations of these committees are made mandatory in nature. That is, let the government, let the government, submit an action taken report on the recommendations of these committees, so that these committees will have some kind of credibility left with themselves. Secondly, we also say that these committees, these committees should also regularly get the bills that are introduced by the parliament on the floor or the government on the floor of the house. It should be made mandatory for all these bills that are introduced by the government on the floor of the house should be sent to these committees for their scrutiny. Right now, since 2019, when the government had got majority on the floor of the house, till now, they have not sent a single bill to the committee, and that really impacts the functioning of this committee system also. Why? Because nobody, the government doesn't always thinks that they can always dispense with this. They can always dispense with parliament, and it also impacts. It also has a direct impact on the functioning of this committee system also, because the government should do not take these committees very seriously, and that is the reason why what is required is that we must make sure that these committees, for them to be effective, we need to make changes to the parliamentary reforms also, wherein it should be made mandatory for the government to consult these committees before introducing the bills on the floor of the house. It should be made mandatory for the government to submit what is called action taken report on the basis of the recommendations of these committees. So these are all the things which they have to do, right? This is what you have to write for this question, right? Shall we move on to the next question? If you have any doubt, you can ask. Otherwise, you can move on to the next question, right? Let us move on to the next question then. Right. Has digital illiteracy, particularly in rural areas, coupled with lack of information and communication technologies, accessibility, hindered socioeconomic development? Examine with justification. So the question directly says that what we have in rural areas in our country is what is called a digital divide. What we have in our country is what is called digital divide. So what are we saying here is that we have in urban areas where people are making use of this digital technologies and to get better services from the government. Whereas in rural areas, this digital illiteracy is coming in the way of in the way of service delivery mechanisms. It is also coming in the way of socio-economic development of the country. Examine with justification, right? Now, what is the problem with a digital technology or a digital governance in rural areas? First and foremost, accessibility. The problem is that in rural areas, people do not have access to these digital technologies because of infrastructure problems. In most of the rural areas, people do not have access to internet. Second problem here is that people simply do not know how to use these digital technologies also for their own betterment. They do not know how to use these digital technologies, what we call digital illiteracy. They simply don't know how to use these digital technologies for their own betterment because illiteracy, lack of awareness. Next problem is lack of responsive mechanisms also at the in the rural areas. Just a minute, someone is there. हाँ, कई बार कई बार हाँ, ये जैसे कि आपकी सर्विस फ्री है इसलिए होगा आपकी सर्विस फ्री है तो आपको 30 मिनट तक कोई दिक्कत आएगी आपको पैसे नहीं लगेंगे सॉरी आप नहीं Yes, I'm back. Same problem. Digital technologies. I have problem with my internet and so the internet guy had come and he's getting it repaired. We are talking about digital technology problems, and I'm also facing the same problems. Timing is perfect here, right? At least I'm living in a rural area called Delhi, so that is the reason why I'm having more problems here. The question is about also about rural areas only, right? So these are all the problems that we are talking about here. These are all the problems that we are talking about here. And second, as we said, in unresponsive services. For example, even if I want to use those uh, technologies that are given to me by the government, unresponsive services. This is what another problem with the digital technologies, unresponsive services by the government. And next problem is that most of this digital governance is in what we call English in a language only. So that is where it becomes problematic. The best example you can see here is this CoWIN app. Initially, this CoWIN app was there only in English language, and that is what Supreme Court also was extremely critical of the government also. Are you living in glass chambers? That is what the government has asked. Is it possible for people in India, wherein 95% of people are not conversant with English language and they are developing this COVID app only in English language. And not only that, people have this problem with the internet speed also. And they are definitely hindering socio-economic development. They are definitely hindering socio-economic development. Another problem is the problem related to safety and security of these digital technologies also, especially digital transactions. People in rural areas still are not convinced about the safety and security of these digital transactions. So these are all the problems that are being faced by the people in rural areas. And is it coming in the way? Is it coming in the way of what we call the socio-economic development of rural areas? Definitely, it is coming in the way of socio-economic development. For example, again, I'll give you one more example. In the last 2.5 years, what we are witnessing is this corona, right? And we are talking about online education. Recently, a study was conducted where it is said that almost 70% of people in the rural areas, especially children, do not have access to this online education. And it is clearly resulting in what is called a digital divide. So obviously, children are not able to gain anything out of these educational outcomes also. This is what again another problem. The next one is take the case of telemedicine. The government comes out with health mission, national skill health mission, and all this digital health mission. But everything is fine. This digital technology should be supported by physical infrastructure at the local level. But the government is focusing mostly on digital technologies without creating the necessary physical infrastructure at the health infrastructure at the local level. This telemedicine and everything can be successful only when we have physical infrastructure. Similarly, take the case of these self-help groups or other, what we call entrepreneurs. When the government talks about this digital revolution and unicorns and startups, all of them are restricted only to metropolitan cities. And do you find any of them in rural areas? Obviously not. You don't find any of them in rural areas. You don't find any of them in interior parts of the country. And that is the reason why in rural areas there is so much of unemployment because simply because they could not make use of it. Again, give one more example: GST. When the GST was introduced, it has only benefited. It has only benefited the big, companies, big organizations in rural area, in urban areas. They could ruthlessly exploit the weaknesses in the GST, especially the input tax credit. But but it is a small businessman in rural areas simply who had gone out of a business because of this because of lack of digital literacy on their part, right? And similarly, the government also talks about digitalization of there's what we call FIRs also being filed online. But when we don't have the corresponding physical infrastructure, all of them are going to be are going to be what you call at the end of the day less effective. And that is the reason why you know more than the access, what is required is that we must create the necessary infrastructure. As we study again, there is so much of red tapeism within the government. There is so much of colonial attitudes of our bureaucracy. There is so much of centralization of power, and there is a complete absence of accountability mechanisms. All of them combined together will make sure that this digital technology and digital revolution would always remain only on paper. And what are the solutions? Once we know the problems, we can easily know all the solutions also. All the solutions, starting with governance reforms, starting with improving digital infrastructure, starting with the social, responsive service delivery mechanisms, starting with creating awareness among the people in rural areas, starting with creating all these apps, only in the vernacular languages, and ensuring accountability mechanisms. These are all the things that you have to write for this question. These are all the things, right, that you have to write for this question. So, if you have any doubt, you can ask. Otherwise, I can move on to the next question. If you have any doubts, you can ask. Yes? Any doubt? Okay, then let us move on to the next question. Let us move on to the next question. Right. Can civil society and non-governmental organizations present an alternative model of public service delivery to benefit the common citizen? Discuss the challenges of this alternative model. So, as we say, the basic problem with the government, all these things, if you remember, you have studied extensively in public administration. These are all the things that are not at all what we call difficult. These are all not at all difficult for you, right? Those who have studied public administration. So the question says, can these civil society organizations and NGOs present an alternative model of public service delivery to benefit the common citizen? If you remember, in public administration, we study about public choice theory, giving choices, alternatives to the people in terms of service delivery mechanisms. As usual, you have to start with the why aspect of the question. That is what we say all the time. You have to start with the why aspect of the question. So what is the why aspect of the question here? The why aspect of the question is that absolute monopoly by the state over service delivery mechanisms has only resulted in so many problems in implementation. What are the problems that we talk about as part of implementation in service delivery mechanisms? First and foremost, the basic problem is the monopoly of the state is meant that the state is neither concerned about the quality of service delivery mechanisms nor is concerned about the price that the people have to pay for those service delivery mechanisms. And then another problem is the state never provides what we call timely service delivery mechanisms, and there is no accountability also. There is no accountability also here. There is not at all any accountability. There is no accountability also here because state has absolute monopoly, so there is no accountability also here. There is no accountability of the state. So people suffer because of the monopoly, absence of accountability, absence of responsiveness, and lack of participation also, because everything is what we call on the basis of what we call a centralized top-down approach to implementation. This is where the problem with all the service delivery mechanisms. This is where the problem with the service delivery mechanisms. That is what we say here. This is the problem with those service delivery mechanisms. That is the reason why we need choices. We need alternatives. We need alternatives for service delivery mechanisms. We need those alternatives in service delivery mechanisms. And what are those alternatives that we are talking about? Civil society organizations and NGOs, non-governmental organizations. These civil society organizations and non-governmental organizations can definitely provide alternatives in terms of service delivery mechanisms. What do? They can go to the field level. They can uh, approach the beneficiaries. They can ensure that outcomes are realized. They can ensure that outcomes are realized. Why? Because they are not concerned about the rules and regulations. As we study the basic problem with the government, the basic problem with the government of bureaucracy is that they give more importance to they give more importance to what we call rules and regulations than outcomes. That is where the problem is. So that is the reason why what is required is outcome orientation. These civil society organizations and NGOs, they don't have to worry about following the rules and regulations. They can focus on outcomes. And another thing that we can say about civil society organizations is that these civil society organizations will also focus on will also have those volunteers or those people who are committed to public service. Please remember the difference between the administrator and part of this NGO is that the administrators, for them, administration is part of their profession, whereas for NGOs, this serving the people is part of their passion. So they can bring in the much needed passion as far as providing the service of the people are concerned. And similarly, the government, the civil society organizations also can provide what is called independent review of the performance of the schemes, because most of the time the performance evaluation done by the government is mostly not impartial or unbiased. For example, if you look at it, when the Ministry of Women and Child Development talks about this food security and everything else, they will say that there are no malnourishment in the country. Recently, also, if you happen to see the newspapers, Supreme Court again scolded the governments. When the central and state governments have said that we don't have any data about malnourishment or hunger deaths. Why? Because they don't want to accept the fact. Whereas civil society organizations need not be under this foundation. They can always call the spade more than a spade. And that is the reason why you can see, there are so many programs that are being implemented by the government with the help of NGOs, where it is Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan. Majority of the Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan schemes are implemented only with the NGOs and civil society organizations, where it is Food Security Act. whether it is a midday meal schemes, whether it is it is in a health generation schemes, schemes related to health sector. This is where you can see all these services are far better provided by civil society organizations, and they also provide critical inputs to the government regarding public policies also. For example, during the corona crisis, most of the civil society organizations have demanded the government to come out with proactive measures to protect poorer sections of society. That is the reason why the government had come out with some of the schemes like Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana and other things, right? So that is where you can say. Now, what are the problems here? What are the problems faced by the civil society organizations? Uh, First and foremost, as we discussed also, most of these NGOs they get funds from the government, so it becomes difficult for them to act in an impartial and unbiased manner. That is where it is become. Second one is the colonial attitudes of our bureaucracy that prevents them from accepting the civil society organizations and NGOs as equal partners in development. Third problem is that corruption in the functioning of the civil society organizations. There is so much of corruption in the functioning of the civil society organizations. Misuse of funds, corruption. This is where another problem is. And fourth problem is most of the civil society organizations are working with vested interests also. They are working with vested interests also. That is, they are only working for themselves or sometimes working against the state also. This is another problems. And and then civil society organizations also become what we call lobbyists also. They're lobbying with the political executive, MPs, MLAs to get more funds for themselves. Instead of working for the people in a in a in a selfless manner, they are more interested in their own for money, more comfort, more luxuries, and so on and so forth. That is where the problems. And what are the solutions? As the second YRC suggested, we must what we call institutionalize the relationship between the civil society organizations and the we must institutionalize the relationship between civil society organizations and the government. We must ensure more transparency and accountability in their functioning, and we must punish those civil society organizations which are indulging in anti-national activities, and at the same time promote those civil society organizations which are which are right working for the people. That is what we write. Yes. So this is what you have to write for this question. I think I have missed out on one question, right? If you have any doubt, you can ask me. Otherwise, let me go to the next question. If you have any doubt, you can ask me. Otherwise, let me go to the next question. Any doubt? Okay. Let me go to the next question. The women in post-independent India have excelled in various fields. The social attitude towards women and the feminist movement has been patriarchal. Apart from women education and women empowerment schemes, what interventions can help in this changes this milieu? Right? I think again, those who have attended our classes, we have seen all these things so many times in our class. So, in spite of so many schemes, programs implemented by the government, this women empowerment has not become a reality. There are so many problems. One is the attitude of the society towards women and the patriarchal society, male-dominated societies who are not willing to accept women as equal partners in development. So the question says is that how to empower this woman. We talk about all the time this women education and women empowerment schemes and all these things are fine, but at the end of the day, what else can be done? At the end of the day, what else can be done to empower women? What should be done to empower women? Right? If you remember, all these things we have discussed in our classes, let us try to recall what we have said. First and foremost, all these education and empowerment schemes, all of them can be successful. All of them can be successful only when, first and foremost, we can ensure safety and security of women. This is very, very important. They can be successful only when we can ensure safety and security of women, both within the household and also outside the household. For example, self-help groups. Why they have not been successful in most of these why they have not been successful in most of these North India and eastern and western parts of the country. Why the self-help groups have not been successful? For the simple reason that women in these parts of the country, they are not allowed to go out because of safety and security, especially in rural areas. Regularly these atrocities are committed against them, sexual atrocities, and they simply cannot guarantee their own safety and security. That is the reason why these kind of schemes are not successful. Next problem here is that why they are not successful, because first and foremost, as I said, safety and security. Next problem that we talk about is the problem related to women as a powerful political pressure group. Women are not coming together to discuss, to debate, to make their problems electoral issue. In India, women constitute 48% of our population. For example, scheduled caste 7.5%. They are very powerful, politically powerful pressure group. Scheduled tribes again 15%. Again very powerful pressure group. OBCs 27%. They are powerful pressure group. But what about women? 48%. They are not a powerful pressure group. The government simply is not at all concerned about the problems of women, challenges faced by women, because women do not vote in elections on the basis of their problems related to their gender. That is the reason why, if you look at it in the coming UP elections also, the issues are religion and caste, but not about women, gender. And Congress party has said that they will give 40% of tickets to women. Why they are giving 40% of tickets to women? Because they know that no one will win. In Bihar, they have given 50% of reservations for women in Bihar. They have given 50% of reservations for women in what we call these panchayat bodies. Why? Because for the simple reason that they don't have any real powers. That is what we say here. Every political party in India pay only lip service to problems of women. Every political party will only pay lip service to problems of women, and they don't implement any of the reforms that they have spoken about. They don't implement any of the reforms. That is the reason why the second major problem that we have to talk about here is inability or failure of women to come to become what we call a powerful pressure group. That is what is required for them to empower themselves. Third important thing here is the education system, right? I'm not talking about women education here. I'm talking about overall education system. The basic problem here is that our education system is not gender sensitive. It does not make people sensitive to the problems here, to their problems. It is simple as that. Our education system again has parochial attitudes, patriarchy. It has only patriarchy, parochial attitudes. It never teaches children from their childhood onwards to respect women, to respect girl child. So when they become young, when they are grown up, they continue with the same attitudes. So that is where again another problem that we talk about. Next problem that we talk about here is this glass ceiling that we see in what we call jobs, whether it is private sector or public sector. Till now, we did not have any female chief justice, right? Till now, we did not have any female cabinet secretary. Why? Because it is believed that women are not capable of performing all these tasks. That kind of patriarchal attitudes, this kind of glass ceiling is what we see when it comes to women. This is what we see when it comes to women, and that is the reason why. That is the reason why again another major problem in empowerment of women. Next one is finances. At the end of the day, it is all about finances, right? It is all about finances. Women simply do not have any economic independence. Please remember, they might be the earning members of the family, but they don't have the freedom to they don't have the freedom to spend that money. It is the male members of the family who will decide how to spend that money. They don't have that kind of economic independence also. They don't have any economic independence. Next, as we can see here, during the last 2 years of corona crisis, We spoke about so many sections of society getting badly affected, but nobody talks about the fact that it is the women who lost 80% of their jobs during the corona crisis compared to men. Again, as I said, this kind of gender, this kind of gender inequality persists in our country. That is where the problem is, right? This is where again the problem is, right? So then now, let us look at what are the solutions. We have seen, the problems. Let us look at what are the solutions. What could be the solutions? First and foremost, as I said, the government must ensure safety and security of women both within the household as well as outside the household also, especially when they go out. This is a non-negotiable at all. You must punish all those people who are committing atrocities against women. Timely punishment, creating fear of God in the minds of those people is very, very important. If at all, if you want any kind of empowerment of women, you need women police stations. We need CCTV cameras. We need 24-hour surveillance. We need sensitization of our police forces. We need very efficient legal system. We need very efficient legal system, right? These are all the things that are non-negotiable. Then we need gender budgeting from lowest level to the topmost level. Every single rupee spent by the government, 48%, 48 paisa should be spent on women only. It is as simple as that one. They constitute 48% of population. Let they receive 48% of the funds also, which is very, very, very important. Every single rupee spent by the government must be have this component for women. It is as simple as that one. Next thing the government can do is give them complete free education from KG to PG. Let them have free education from KG to PG. Then we need to have reservations for women. That is important because there are so many sections of society we are calling them as socially and economically disadvantaged. If at all, if you have to talk about in India, any section of society which can be called socially and economically disadvantaged, it has to be women. So they should be given reservations. You can take out all the reservations. That is not a problem at all. But we must make sure that women are given these reservations. Very, very important. Next thing that has to be done here is education system. As I said, we must change our education system. We must make it more gender sensitive. We should teach children from childhood onwards how to respect women, how to respect girl children. This is what another thing that we have to do. These are all the interventions that are needed to change our attitudes towards women and also to empower women. That is what we say. These are all the things that are needed. Right? If you have any doubts, you can ask me. Otherwise, let me move on to the next question. Any doubts? You can ask me. Right? Right. Let me go on to the next question. Right. Critically examine the aims and objectives of SEO. Critically examine the aims and objectives of SEO. What importance does it hold for India? Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Why this question was asked? Again, this is a very straightforward question. Why this question was asked? Because this question was asked because this meeting was held recently, just before the mains examination, and our Prime Minister also has addressed this meeting. And at that point of time, if you happen to see, so many newspaper articles had also come up regarding SEO. So if you are for IR, as I keep on saying, what you have to remember is the time gap between the prelims and mains, whatever that happens in those 3-4 months, keep a tab on all those activities and then you will get all the 4 questions right in your mains examination. In case of IR, international relations, not much you have to do. We don't have to do much here. Just keep a tab on what happens in those 2 months. That should be more than enough. 3 months. That should be more than enough. Coming back to SEO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, it had come into existence basically to ensure the political, economic, and security cooperation between the member countries. It had so many hiccups. We don't have to go into the history of all those things because you have to write only 250 words. The question says critically examine the aims and objectives. In 2017, India had become a permanent member of this SEO, right? Basically, what are objectives of SEO? There are very generic objectives like, to strengthen the relation between the member countries by developing political security and economic cooperation. Then, it also talks about joint cooperation members, joint coordination between the members, to confront threats from, terrorism, Naxalism, and terrorism, extremism, and separatism, because all these member countries are facing so much of a threat from these things, and uh, and it also looks at developing a democratic and equitable international order. This SEO also looks at developing a democratic and equitable international order, and it also works towards maintaining peace, security, safety in the region, in this region, and then and also to strengthen agreements in the field of trade, commerce, transportation, tourism, environment, education, so on and so forth. Right now, coming back here, what importance does it hold for India? As we can see here, the basic thing that we are talking about here is that what we are witnessing in IR, international global geopolitics, is this kind of a triangular relationship that is developing between Russia, China, and Pakistan. Russia, China, and Pakistan, they are, coming together to pose a threat to India. Already, China and Pakistan, they are our, you can say enemies. They are our neighbors, and they are also our enemies, and it is creating a lot of discomfort in the corridors of our, external affairs ministry. And on top of it, in recent times, what happened? Afghanistan used to be an ally of India till recently, but with the Taliban taking over Afghanistan and Taliban directly working under Pakistan, it becomes much more problematic for India. That is where SEO can be a little bit more problematic for Indians. That is where it can be a little bit more problematic, right? And of course, another problem here is that China has not at all shown any kind of respect for this kind of international agreements and treaties. It has not shown, and so China uses all these organizations only for its own benefit, and India has to be extremely careful to what extent it can become active, to what extent it can sacrifice its interest in this Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Also, India also has to be little bit more what we call, skeptical about this. Then why? Because under this SEO only, China, this is pushing this, BRI project also. It is also pushing this BRI project under SEO only, which creates a lot of problems for India. Then you take the case of Russia again. Russia has moved away from India in recent times. Russia is joining hands with, China and Pakistan. Especially take the case of Ukraine. You can see, you must have seen the newspapers also today. America has resigned to the fact that Russia is going to occupy Ukraine also. That again creates more instability in the region. And then, and during the Corona pandemic also, you can see that these SCO countries did not have any much of coordination. For example, India wanted to supply medicines and other, essential goods and services to Afghanistan, but Pakistan is coming in the way of all those things, and that is where the problem is. But in spite of all these things, India cannot afford to leave this SEO. In spite of all these things, we cannot afford to leave SEO. Why? Because India has a very deep, India has very deep relationship with the Central Asian republics. It can be, cultural, it can be economic, or it can be strategic. So we cannot leave, you know this Shanghai Cooperation Organization. And another thing is that another major thing that India is interested in is this energy security. that is provided by Shanghai Cooperation Council, Cooperation Organization, because we can have access to huge amount of mineral and energy resources that are there in Central Asian republics, which we can use it for both countries' benefit also. Then you know it also provides opportunity for India to tame both China and Pakistan, because they have to be little bit more what we call restrained when they attend these kind of multilateral institutions. That can also play a very important role, and it can also help India to connect itself to Eurasia also, because we can have that kind of corridor where we can also connect it to rest of the Europe also. That is the reason why this SCO can be very important from India's perspective in the future. It can be very important from India's perspective in the future. That is what we say it here. If you have any doubt, you can ask. Otherwise, quickly we can move on to the next next question. Otherwise, quickly we can move on to the next question. That is the last question. Right? Right. Let me move on to the next question then. Let us go to the next question, the last question. Again, this question, as you can see here, is part of current affairs. As I said, whatever that happens in the gap between prelims and mains is what UPSC is asking as part of your IR. So you don't have to read about IR for mains till your prelims are over. This is what the UPSC is doing in the last few years. This question is also belonging to that category only. You can see the question. The newly trination partnership ACUS, newly trination partnership ACUS is aimed at countering China's ambitions in the Indo-Pacific region. Is it going to supersede the existing partnerships in the region? Discuss the strengths and impact of ACUS in the present scenario. A very good question here. So recently, what happened? These important countries, Australia, and then United Kingdom and United States of America, they had come up together to form what we call a military alliance that is very important in the Indo-Pacific region. As usual, you have to start with the why aspect of the question. We have to start with why aspect of the question. Why did they come together? That is what we have to look at. Why did they come together? They had come together because of the failure of, you can say, Quad, in a quadrilateral dialogue between India, Japan, Australia, and United States of America. So what is happening here is that for a very long period of time, America has seen China as a major threat. Russia has been replaced with China as a major threat. As we discussed in the previous questions also, China is much more dangerous than Russia also. So America is considering China as a major threat to its interest all over the world, around the globe. Why? Because through its policy of a string of pearls, what China has done is that it is developing this strategic security alliance with most of the countries in the Indo-Pacific region. It is going up to Africa, and it is and then it's this corridor also. So China is moving in different directions. On the one hand, economic partnership. On the other hand, security alliance. And most importantly, China is also using its economic might. It is also using its economic might to to influence the countries around the world. It is also using its economic might to influence the countries around the world. So that is the reason why America believes that it is the time for America to cut China to size. It is believed by America that it is time for it to protect its more security interest, defense interest, the economic interest, especially in the Indo-Pacific region. America believes that the battleground has now shifted to Indo-Pacific region. In this Indo-Pacific region, what are the major countries? You have China, obviously, Japan, and then India, and Australia also. They are the major countries. And of course, China is a major threat. So America wanted to have a relationship with other countries. That is the reason why we had this quadrilateral dialogue, what we call Quad. America was more interested in converting this Quad into what is called a military security partnership. And for reasons best known to it, India is not very keen on developing this into a what is called strategic security relation partnership. China, India does not want to what we call India cannot afford to antagonize China at this point of time. India does not want to create problems for China. That is the reason why India is not very keen. India wanted this Quad to be mostly economic and trade diplomatic alliance rather than a security alliance. That is the reason why then America has decided, let me go and form another alliance in this Indo-Pacific region. That is the reason why this AUKUS had come into existence. Right? Australia, United Kingdom, then United States of America. A means Australia, UK means United Kingdom, US means United States of America. And American president would ask, will it be JACUS also? They include Japan also, like that. But America is very much clear. America has said that they wanted this AUKUS to be exclusive domain of these countries only. They do not want this trilateral relationship to be extended. And both America and Australia as well as the United Kingdom have a same simple vested interest, that is to counter Chinese influence in the Indo-Pacific region. Since they are natural allies as part of NATO countries, so it is not at all a problem for them also. America wanted this AUKUS to be some kind of alternative to NATO also, military alliance, right? And that is the reason why America has said that this focus of AUKUS will be on mostly what we call security and defense aspects, military alliance only. Now, the next question that here is that is it going to supersede the regional partnership in the region? America has said that this Quad has a different, you know, Quad has a different, you know, uh, the aims and objectives. It is mostly a trade alliance, a dialogue partner, and economic union. Whereas, according to America, this is, you know, whereas according to America, this AUKUS is more of a military alliance. That is what America has said. So America has said that this AUKUS will not have any kind of what we call you know will not have any kind of conflict with other alliances. And we have also in this region, we have also this what we call ASEAN is also there. Then we also have other economic alliances also. America has said that there will not be any conflict between all these security alliances. That is what America has said. The basic objective of America to form this alliance is to, is to face the growing threat from this, China as a military alliance. That is what America has said. Now coming back here, what will the strength and impact of hackers? From India's point of view, it is like whatever the job that has to be done by India is being done by someone else. Now China has to focus all its energies. China has to focus all its energies on this security alliance. So obviously, India can expect some kind of peace in its border, and then China will be saddled with all these problems. It will be thinking about you know then China will be thinking about right uh, China will have to be thinking about these only these AUKUS only, so that there will be shift in the focus of China. It can be beneficial for India in the long term. And of course, India is always what we call a natural ally of America. In that sense, in that sense, it can. be helpful for India also, because it can help India in overcoming the threat from Chinese Chinese military, also Chinese defense, also Chinese army. That is what again it is what we call beneficial for India also, right? So this is what we can say as far as uh, the importance and the significance of this AUKUS. In the long term, it can counterbalance the Chinese aggressive designs in the Indo-Pacific region. It can also provide a long-lasting peace and stability in the region also. That is what you will say here, right? So that is what the answer to the question here. That is what we say answer to the question here. And we have, I think, completed all the question papers. Paper 2 we have done, paper 4 we have done, and also essay paper. We have completed all of them. So that is where we can say now, we can say end to our discussions of GS papers. I will be discussing rest of the papers of GS, especially economy, social issues, and internet security. Those things also I will be discussing later as part of our special classes and YouTube classes. You can keep on watching them in our you can keep on watching them here on our Telegram channel, as well as Unacademy YouTube Unlock platform. That is what you can do. I think I will do that. Don't worry, Nilesh. I will be doing those case studies also in our coming YouTube and special classes, right? Otherwise, we can say now final goodbye for this month. We will again meet in the next month and continue with these these right special classes and YouTube classes. Till then, take care of yourself.